I'd never asked for those things that I'd been happy in public school, and had wanted to take out loans for college. The conversation got heated. Dad threatened to skip the wedding if Jake wasn't invited, saying I was forcing him to choose between his children. I reminded him of all the times he failed to stand up for me when Jake was being cruel, but he dismissed my feelings, saying I was dwelling on the past and needed to grow up. By the time we hung up, we were both upset. I felt drained and conflicted. Part of me wondered if I was doing the right thing, if maybe I should just give in to keep the peace. But a stronger part knew that I deserved to have a wedding day free from Jake's negativity. Sandra called me the next day. To my surprise, she was more understanding. She started by apologizing for calling so soon after my fight with Dad, saying she thought I might need time to cool off. Then she admitted that she and Dad had spoiled Jake and failed to correct his behavior over the years. She shared some of her own frustrations with Jake's attitude, revealing the side of their relationship I'd never seen before. Sandra said she respected my decision and would attend the wedding regardless, but hoped I'd reconsider about Jake. She suggested a family therapy session, thinking it might help us all communicate better. I told her I'd think about it, appreciating her efforts, but still feeling wary. Jake somehow found out about the uninvite, probably Dad, and started posting passive-aggressive comments on social media about fake family and conditional love. He even reached out to some mutual family friends, spinning a story about how I was unfairly excluding him soon. I was getting messages from cousins and aunts, some supporting me, others criticizing my decision. The situation stirred up a lot of family drama. Some relatives sided with Dad, and Jake saying I was overreacting and that family should always come first. Others, particularly on my mom's side, fully supported my decision. My mom's sister, Aunt Lisa, was especially vocal in her support. She reminded me of how Mom always taught me to stand up for myself. The family divide was taking its toll on me. I found myself constantly checking my phone, dreading the next angry message or manipulative post. It was affecting my sleep and my work. Alex noticed how stressed I was becoming and suggested we take a weekend away to regroup and focus on what we wanted for our wedding. We spent a peaceful couple of days at a cabin in the mountains, hiking and talking through our feelings. Being away from the constant barrage of family opinions helped clear my head. Alex and I had long conversations about our values, our vision for our future, and what family meant to us. It really reinforced that we were on the same page and that our relationship was the priority. When we got back from our trip, we made some decisions. One, we're sticking to our guns about Jake. He's not invited to the wedding. 2, we're hiring security for the wedding just in case Jake or anyone else tries to cause a scene. 3, we're going to have a special memorial for my mom. During the ceremony, we'll light a candle, and I wear a locket with her picture. This feels even more important now, a reminder of a strong woman who raised me. 4, we're scaling back Dad's role in the wedding. He was supposed to walk me down the aisle, but given his reaction, I'm considering walking alone or asking my uncle Mom's brother to do it. 5, we're going to take a break from social media until after the wedding to avoid the ongoing drama. I'm sad that this happy time has turned into such a source of stress, but I'm trying to stay focused on the positives. Alex and I are more united than ever, and this has shown us who really supports our relationship. My college roommate Sarah has been an incredible support, helping with wedding plans and providing a listening ear whenever I need to vent. I'm still hoping Dad will come around, but I'm prepared for the possibility that he won't attend. It hurts to think he might not be there, but I refuse to compromise on having a wedding that truly reflects Alex and me, surrounded by people who genuinely support us. The next few months will be challenging as we navigate this family tension while trying to plan our special day, but I'm feeling stronger in my decision and more certain than ever that I'm marrying the right person whatever happens with my family. I know that Alex and I are starting our own family unit, built on mutual respect, understanding, and love. Update 2. A lot has happened since my last update. and I wanted to share how things unfolded about a month before the wedding. Dad reached out to me. He asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. I was hesitant, but agreed. We decided to meet at a small cafe halfway away. Between our homes, neutral territory for what I expected to be a difficult conversation. When I arrived, Dad was so proud, throwing him a big going-away party. I chose to attend a local state university, living at home. To save money, I could tell Dad was a bit disappointed, but he tried to hide it. During college break, Jake would come home and regale everyone with stories of his fancy internships and exotic spring break trips. Meanwhile, I was juggling classes and a part-time job at a local coffee shop. Jake would make snide comments about how I was wasting my potential by not going to a real school. It was during my sophomore year of college that I met Alex, 31M. He came into the coffee shop where I worked, ordered a complicated drink, and then left a generous tip. We started chatting, and soon he became a regular. Alex had grown up in the same working-class neighborhood as me. He never went to college, instead learning carpentry from his uncle and eventually starting his own contracting business. Alex and I bonded over our shared background and values. He understood the pride I felt in earning my own money and the importance I placed on hard work. We started dating, and for the first time in years, I felt truly seen and appreciated. When I introduced Alex to my family, Jake immediately started making backhanded comments. He asked Alex if he was just a handyman and seemed shocked when I mentioned Alex owned his own business. Dad didn't say anything to defend Alex, which really hurt. Sandra, surprisingly, was polite and welcoming, even expressing interest in Alex's work. Over the next few years, I saw my dad and step-family less and less. I threw myself into building a life with Alex. We moved in together, adopted a rescue dog named Max, and started talking about marriage. Alex's business took off, specializing in eco-friendly home renovations. I finished my degree in graphic design and started freelancing, eventually landing a full-time job, a small marketing firm. Last year, on our 5th anniversary, Alex proposed. He took me back to the coffee shop where we met, got down on one knee, right where he used to sit, and asked me to marry him. I happily accepted. We set a date for this fall and started planning our dream wedding, a rustic chic affair at a converted barn venue. When it came time to make the guest list, I hesitated over inviting Jake. Part of me felt obligated to include him as family, but a bigger part dreaded having his negative energy at my wedding. I thought about all the snide comments he might make about the venue, the food, or our friends. After much deliberation, I decided to invite Dad, Sandra, and Jake, hoping that maybe time had matured Jake. But last month, when I went to Dad and Sandra's for dinner to discuss wedding plans, Jake was there almost immediately. He started making digs about our quaint backyard wedding and how he was surprised we could afford a real venue. I tried to brush it off, but then he started criticizing our choice not to have a religious ceremony, saying it showed how unsophisticated we were. I had enough and told Jake he was uninvited to the wedding. He laughed it off, saying he probably couldn't make it anyway since he had a friend yacht party that weekend. Dad pulled me aside and said I was being too sensitive. He told me to apologize to Jake and said it would look bad if my stepbrother wasn't at the wedding. I left feeling angry and hurt. I don't want someone at my wedding who has done nothing but put me down for years, but I also don't want to create a rift in the family. Alex says he'll support whatever I decide, but I can tell he doesn't want Jake there either. Part of me wants to stand my ground and have the wedding I want, surrounded by people who genuinely love and support us. But another part feels guilty about excluding Jake and potentially disappointing my dad. I'm torn and could use some outside perspectives. Ida, if I don't invite Jake to the wedding. Update 1. Thank you all for your supportive comments and advice. After a lot of reflection, I decided to stick to my guns and not invite Jake to the wedding. However, the situation has gotten more complicated. I called Dad to explain my decision. I chose a time when I knew he'd be alone, not wanting Sandra or Jake to overhear. As the phone rang, I felt a mix of determination and anxiety. When Dad answered, I took a deep breath and dove in. I started by telling Dad how much I valued our family, but that Jake's constant put-downs and elitist attitude had no place at my wedding. I reminded him of specific incidents, like the time Jake mocked my high school graduation dress, or when he implied Alex was a gold digger when we got engaged. I emphasized that this day was about celebrating mine and Alex's love, not appeasing others. For appearance's sake, Dad didn't take it well. His voice got louder as he accused me of being selfish and dividing the family. He brought up how much they'd done for me, the private school education, the financial support during college. I felt my own temper rising as I pointed out that I stood up to my toxic stepbrother and invited him from my wedding. It caused family drama, but 6 months later something incredible happened that I never saw coming. My childhood was pretty typical until I turned 10. That's when my mom was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. She fought hard for almost a year, but in the end the disease took her from us. I remember sitting in the hospital room, holding her hand as she slipped away. Dad, 55M, was devastated. They had been high school sweethearts, married right after graduation. Mom was the love of his life, and suddenly he was a single parent to a grieving 10-year-old. The next few years were tough. Dad threw himself into work, trying to keep us afloat financially. While dealing with his own grief, he worked long hours at the factory, often picking up overtime shifts. I learned to be independent pretty quickly by 12. I was doing my own laundry, packing my school lunches, and even cooking simple meals for us. We weren't poor, but money was always tight. I remember the embarrassment of wearing hand-me-down to school and not being able to go on class trips because we couldn't afford it. But despite the hardships, Dad and I were close. We had a standing Saturday morning tradition of making pancakes together and watching cartoons. Those simple moments meant the world to me. When I was 14, Dad started dating again. I was hesitant at first, but I could see how much happier he was. He went out a few times with women he met through friends or work, but nothing serious. Then he met Sandra, 50F, at a community fundraiser. She was beautiful, successful, and made Dad laugh in a way I hadn't heard since Mom died. Sandra was different from the women in her neighborhood. She owned her own marketing firm and lived in a big house in the fancy part of town. She was recently divorced and had a son, Jake. Then 14M. At first, I was excited about the idea of having a brother. Growing up as an only child, I'd always wondered what it would be like to have siblings. Dad and Sandra dated for about 2 years before they got married. During that time, we'd often have dinners together or go on outings as a group. Jay seemed nice enough, if a bit aloof. He went to a private school and had a busy schedule of extracurricular activities, so we didn't spend much time together. The wedding was a lavish affair, nothing like the small backyard ceremonies I was used to attending. I remember feeling out of place in my new dress, the most expensive piece of clothing I'd ever owned, watching Dad and Sandra dance under twinkling lights. That night was the beginning of a whole new life for us. We moved into Sandra's big house in her upscale neighborhood. Suddenly, I had my own room with an ensuite bathroom, a far cry from the small 2-bedroom apartment Dad and I had shared. The change was exciting, but also overwhelming. I felt like I'd stepped into a different world. The first few months were an adjustment period. Dad was working less as Sandra's income allowed him to cut back on hours. I was enrolled in the same private school as Jake, wearing a uniform for the first time in my life. The coursework was more challenging, and I struggled to keep up at first. My classmates seemed so sophisticated, talking about summer homes and ski trips, while I'd never even been on a plane. Jake and I were the same age, but we couldn't have been more different. He'd grown up with every advantage: expensive clothes, the latest gadgets, regular vacations to exotic places. I, on the other hand, still felt weird about asking Dad to buy me new shoes when my old ones got holes in them. At first, Jake seemed merely indifferent to me, but as time went on, his attitude became more openly disdainful. He'd make comments about how I dressed or ate, implying I lacked refinement. Once, when I was struggling with a French assignment, a language he'd been studying since elementary school, he laughed and said I guess some people just aren't cut out for culture. What hurt more than Jay's comments was Dad's reaction, or lack thereof. He never seemed to notice the way Jake spoke to me. Or if he did, he didn't say anything. I think he was so eager to bond with Jake. And please, Sandra, that he overlooked how Jake treated me. There were times I wanted to say something, to tell Dad how much it hurt, but I held back. I didn't want to cause problems in his new marriage as high school went on. The divide between Jake and me only grew. He was popular, involved in student government, and captain of the debate team. I found my niche with the art kids, spending hours in the ceramic studio, trying to recreate the bull's mom I used to make together. When it came time for college, Jake went off to an Ivy League school on the East Coast. Dad and Sandra were already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. As I approached, I was struck by how tired and stressed he looked. The confident, jovial man I remembered from my childhood seemed to have aged years in just a few months. We started with awkward small talk about the weather and work. Then, after a long pause, Dad surprised me. He started by apologizing. He admitted that he had been so focused on trying to blend our families and please Sandra that he had neglected my feelings over the years. He acknowledged that he should have stepped in when Jake was being hurtful, and that he had failed me as a father in many ways. As he spoke, I could see the genuine remorse in his eyes. He told me that my stance on the wedding had forced him to reflect on his relationships with both Jake and me. He realized he had been enabling Jake's bad behavior, and that it was damaging our entire family dynamic. Dad shared that he and Sandra had started going to family counseling. He said it was opening his eyes to patterns in their parenting and family dynamics that he'd never noticed before. He talked about how he'd always felt guilty about the years when money was tied after Mom died, and how that guilt had led him to overcompensate with material things. Once he married Sandra, I was touched by Dad's sincerity, but still wary. Years of hurt don't disappear with one conversation. I told him I appreciated his apology, but that it didn't erase everything that had happened. We ended up talking for hours, really opening up about our feelings and experiences. Since he married Sandra, it was emotional and difficult, but also good. Towards the end of our conversation, Dee brought up the wedding. He said he respected my decision about Jake and wouldn't pressure me to invite him. He asked if he could still attend the wedding, saying he would understand if I said no, but that he really wanted to be there for me. I told Dad I needed some time to think about it. The conversation had given me a lot to process, and I wanted to discuss it with Alex before making any decisions. Dad understood and thanked me for hearing him out. After thinking it over and having a long talk with Alex, I decided to give Dad another chance. I called him and said he could come to the wedding, but I was sticking with my decision to have my uncle walk me down the aisle. Dad accepted this graciously, saying he was just happy to be included in a surprising turn of events. Sandra reached out to me separately. She told me that she and Dad had had some hard conversations about their parenting of Jake. She admitted that they had spoiled him and failed to instill good values. Sandra said they were taking steps to address this, including cutting off Jake financially until he agrees to attend counseling and show real change. Sandra also apologized for not being more supportive of me. Over the years, she shared that, as a career-focused woman, she had sometimes felt unsure of how to connect with it. Stepdaughter, she expressed a desire to build a better relationship moving forward. The week before the wedding, I received an unexpected text from Jake. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was more reflexive than I'd ever known him to be. He said he regretted how he treated me over the years and that he was working on himself. He said he understood why he wasn't invited to the wedding and wished Alex and me well. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small step in the right direction. The wedding itself was beautiful. We had perfect weather for our outdoor ceremony at the converted barn. Dad kept his word and didn't cause any drama. He seemed genuinely happy for Alex and me, and even made an effort to mingle with Alex's family. I caught him a few times, looking at me with a mixture of pride and sadness. I think he was remembering Mom and wishing she could have been there. Sandra was there too, and she went out of her way to be kind and helpful. She complimented my dress, helped coordinate with the caterers when there was a small mix-up, and even gave a heartfelt toast at the reception. Having my uncle walk me down the aisle felt right. We included a lovely tribute to my mom, lighting a candle and displaying her photo. It brought tears to many eyes, including Dad's. The ceremony and reception were filled with love and joy, just as we hoped. While the road to the wedding was rocky, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of our family relationships. There's still a lot of work to be done, but it feels like we're moving in a positive direction. Update 3. It's been 6 months since the wedding, and I wanted to give a final update on how things have progressed with my family. The positive changes I saw in Dad at the wedding have continued. He's been making a real effort to be present in my life, calling regularly, and even helping Alex and me with some home renovation projects. Last month, he surprised us by showing up on a Saturday morning with bagels and coffee, just like we used to do when I was a kid. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. We've had some deep conversations about the past, and while it's been painful at times, it feels like we're finally addressing issues that have been simmering for years. Dad's been more open about his struggles after Mom died, and how that influenced his decisions with Sandra and Jake. It's helping me understand him better, even if I don't agree with everything he did. Sandra has also been surprisingly supportive. She's become something of a mentor to me in my career, offering advice and even connecting me with some valuable networking opportunities. It's a dynamic I never expected, but I'm grateful for it. She recently invited me to speak at a Women in Business seminar her company was hosting, which was a great EXP experience. The biggest surprise has been Jake. About 2 months after the wedding, he reached out and asked if we could meet. I was hesitant, but agreed to coffee in a public place. When we met, Jake seemed different, humbler, more self-aware. He gave me a full, genuine apology for his behavior over the years. Jake explained that losing his financial support from Dad and Sandra had been a wake-up call. He'd started therapy and had to get a regular job for the first time in his life. He's working as an entry-level marketing assistant, and the experience of having a boss and co-worker seems to have opened his eyes to his privilege and the harm his attitudes had caused. While I appreciated Jake's apology, I made it clear that rebuilding our relationship would take time and effort on his part. Over the past few months, he's been consistently showing up, remembering my birthday, asking thoughtful questions about my life and work, and even offering to help when Alex and I moved to a new house. It's a work in progress, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Last month, we had our first full family dinner in years. Me, Alex, Dad, Sandra, and Jake. It was a bit awkward at first, with everyone seeming unsure of how to act around each other. But as the evening went on, it started to feel nice. We were able to laugh together and have real conversations. Jake and Alex even found some common ground talking about their businesses. I'm not naive enough to think all our issues are resolved. There's still tension sometimes, and we're all learning how to communicate better. But for the first time in a long time, it feels like we're actually becoming a family rather than just people who are related. This experience has taught me a lot about standing up for myself, the importance of genuine apologies and changed behavior, and the possibility of growth and reconciliation. I'm grateful for where we've ended up, and I'm looking forward to continuing to strengthen these relationships in the future. Alex and I are doing great, settling into married life and starting to talk about having kids in the next year or two. It feels good to know that if we do decide to start a family, our child will have grandparents and an uncle who are working on being better people. I hope my story can offer some hope to others dealing with family conflict. Change is possible, but it takes time, effort, and a willingness to be vulnerable and honest with each other.